Hi, everyone. Hopefully, I see a few people still getting connected. If you can make sure to keep your video turned off, please, we'd appreciate it. Great. Okay. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Stacy, and I'm a bookseller and the events coordinator at Belmont Books. Belmont Books, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is an independent and locally owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of virtual events coming up, including Michael Schrage, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, in conversation with Allison Ryder for Michael's new book, Recommendation Engines, and that's tomorrow night. You can register for this and our other events on our website, which is belmontbooks.com, which is also where you can purchase tonight's book, The Smart Wife. A reminder that your audio and video should remain turned off. Any questions can be sent to the host, which is me, via the chat, and I will relay as many as possible to Yolande and Jenny after the presentation. We're very excited to welcome Yolande and Jenny. We're thrilled that they chose to do their launch with us. I want to tell you a little bit about them, and then I will turn the event over to them. Yolande Strengers is Associate Professor of Digital Technology and Society in the Emerging Technologies Research Lab at, is it Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. She investigates the sustainability and gender effects of digital, emerging, and smart technologies and seeks to understand how people, and sometimes their pets, are incorporating new devices and technologies into their everyday lives and homes. Yolande is the author of Smart Energy Technologies in Everyday Life, Social Practices, and Dynamic Non-Humans, and over 50 journal articles and conference papers. Jenny Kennedy is a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Media and Communication at RMIT Melbourne. She's a core member of the Digital Ethnography Research Center. Jenny's research interests cover media practices in everyday life, social discourses around technology use, and material culture, especially in domestic contexts. Her projects currently focus on digital inclusion of low-income populations and the gendering of AI and automation in home environments. And if I can just remind you to please keep your video turned off, I will turn the event over to Yolande and Jenny, and thank you all very much.
That's great, thank you. So we know that most of you are joining us from a US location today, but with the circumstances of the pandemic, instead of us being at Belmont Books enjoying this event in person, Yolande and I are located in our homes in Australia. And we'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and the waters across Australia, where we continue to write, think, teach and learn. We especially acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and the Bunurong language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose lands we live and work, and whose land was stolen and never ceded. We pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend our thanks to Belmont Books for inviting us to have this event. We're very excited and we're really interested to hear from those of you that are watching, and we'll make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions, so please send them through. So I'm going to start by asking some questions of Yolande. Yolande, can you tell us, what is a smart wife?
Thanks, Jenny. So a smart wife, as we understand it, is any form of smart technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, digital voice assistants that are taking on a wifely role in the home. And they could be characterized by their voice or by their name, but also by their personality, their feminized personality, and also by the different types of roles that they're intended to perform in society and the home. Things like caregiving, like housekeeping, homemaking, and even sex, as we explore in the chapter as well. So that's really what the smart wife is. And what unifies a smart wife is it's a particular portrayal of the wife who is harking back to nostalgic stereotypes of women's roles, traditional women's roles and wifely roles in society.
Thank you. Perhaps could you read an excerpt from the book that explains where the inspiration from the smart wife comes from?
I would love to, Jenny, and I'm so happy to be holding a copy in my hands today. We're very excited they arrived in Australia. We weren't sure when they were going to get here with the pandemic, so we're so happy that we've got them in our hands. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of pages from the introduction for you. The principal prototype for the smart wife's mainframe is the 1950s US housewife and her transatlantic cousin in the United Kingdom. Many contemporary societies still ache with nostalgia for this white, middle-class and heteronormative housewife with her perfect home, breezy white linens, artfully arranged flowers, gleaming cookware and homemade meals. Wasn't she wonderful? Her charming dinner conversation, perfectly set hair, those curls, clean and quiet children, and content and successful husband certainly set the bar high for all wives who aspire to this ideal. Or at least that's the way it seems now in the relics of advertisements from the era. This wistful Wonder Woman was unlikely to take on paid work once married, unless it was to do something compatible with her role as a housewife, such as selling Tupperware. The home was her primary, and she nurtured the people within it. This idolised figure still lives on in many sitcoms and iterations of the smart wife generally. She is not our leading lady's only inspirational source code, however. Smart wives also reflect many other cultural expressions of idealised women originating from Asian countries such as China, India, Japan and South Korea, where her reach is expanding. China now has over half of the global market share in digital voice assistants, overtaking the United States in 2019, with shipments exceeding 10 million units. Amazon and Google Home still dominate in the Chinese market, with Baidu, Alibaba and Xiaomi following close behind. A consistent theme among these culturally diverse countries' offerings and uniting smart wife markets worldwide is a set of technologies characterised as a young, demure and sexualised woman or girl who is constantly available for service. The idea of ubiquitous technology that acts like an unwearying wife might sound appealing to some people, ourselves included. But is she really the kind of stereotype we want to be returning home to? Is she actually helping our progress towards gender equity? Aside from keeping us company or ordering the groceries, what else is she doing in upholding systems of power and oppression in capitalist and patriarchal societies? What kind of future is she manifesting? And how else can we imagine her living with us? Characterising the smart home as a smart wife is our critique and intervention into conversations about the future of domestic life, human relationships with AI, and contemporary feminism. In pursuing this character and caricature, we highlight the fundamental problems with the design and marketing of smart home devices that are presented as innovative techno fixes, promising to end the wife drought, though simultaneously embodying and perpetuating outdated stereotypes of women's roles in the home. But we go further by offering our own set of proposals to emancipate and elevate the smart wife in society.
Thanks, Yolande. So we end our book with a chapter that outlines 9 proposals, 9 of our proposals that we want to see occurring in the smart home and smart wife industry. So Yolande, tell us what was one of your favourite proposals that we make?
Well, I like how we go beyond the kind of, I guess, the conventional ways of thinking about how we fix some of the problems with feminized devices, which commonly focus on the voice and, you know, changing to a gender neutral voice or changing to a male voice. And we really try and extend beyond just the focus on how the device sounds. And so one of my favorite proposals is actually the way that the smart wife is inspired by sci-fi. And this is a theme we explore extensively in the book, and we look at all the different types of artificial women that have appeared on our screens and in literature over many years that have inspired the actual design of the technologies that are now entering our homes. And one of our proposals to change this is inspired by Gina Riley's If She Can See It, She Can Be It campaign, which is actually about increasing the representation of women in popular culture and on screen, on the movies and the types of programming that we see and that girls and women have, I guess, access to and see as sort of role models on popular screen. So we apply this to the smart wife and we say, well, she also needs some new inspiration. So we also need to be able to see different representations of artificial women, different representations of AI, on our screens that show us a different type of smart wife and what type of alternative personalities and plot lines might actually inspire the design of these devices. So yeah, something for the sci-fi industry to think about.
I love the way it sets us up like as this tangential career of
Yes,
going into sci-fi writing. Who knows where we'll go with this?
Exactly.
I'm going to turn the tables and hand it over to you.
Great. So now I get to ask Jenny some questions. I'm the interviewer. Jenny, tell me, why did you decide to write this book?
Why did I? There's quite a few reasons actually. I have really great memories of the kind of the birth of the Smart Wife and the conversations that we were having about how, I mean, one, I'm fascinated with home life. I enjoy studying it, and also I'm fascinated with other people's home lives, which is why I spend a lot of time doing research on homes and the focus as a media and comms scholar on how people live with technology. And when we met, Yolande, we were just fascinated by the variations in how households were encountering and engaging with technology, and especially seeing where that was going with smart home technology, with the impact it can have on the way everyone in the home lives their life. And obviously the gendering of the technology, both in terms of the feminization of the products, but also the gendering of who was bringing the technology into the home and how it was being managed, I guess, in the longer term, and the way that was fitting in with other kind of work going on in the home. But then there's another reason of why I wanted to write the book, which doesn't have anything actually, well, it has much less to do with, I think, the content of the book. And it's about the enjoyment of working with other people. It's about it was an easy decision to set off on this kind of adventure of writing the book, because the kind of enjoyment of the discussions and the teasing out of ideas that we get to do together is just so much more enjoyable than trudging through that alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. And of course, we started out, didn't we, researching smart wives that we were finding in people's homes in a fairly kind of contained form, because we were looking at network devices and smart home devices and digital voice assistants. And then the project really just snowballed from there when we started to realize how many other forms of smart wives there were in society that were so related and so connected. And we got so passionate about exploring these other forms as well, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. But the small kernel of an idea that just exploded.
And before we knew it, we had a book. It wasn't quite that simple. It took a couple of years to write, but anyway. Okay. Now I'm going to invite Jenny to read an excerpt from the book that gives some examples of smart wives. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you. And this also comes from the introduction. So an eerie example of the gender dynamics we seek to highlight is found in the Japanese digital voice assistant named Hikari Azuma. Developed by the company Vinclu as part of its Gatebox technology and entering mass production in 2019. This cutesy smart wife is targeted towards the country's single residents, now the largest segment of the population. Azuma is a virtual anime hologram and with blue hair and matching outfits, who lives in a glass tube about 30 centimeters high and 10 centimeters wide. Notably, other digital voice assistants like Alexa and Google Home live inside containers too, a point that we return to later in the book. She is depicted as a young 20-year-old woman with a schoolgirlish and upbeat personality. Azuma wears a short skirt and over-the-knee socks and has a high-pitched voice supplemented with coquettish giggles. In several promotional videos, she takes care of a lonely, hard-working young Japanese man. Her key role is to greet her master with excitement when he comes home and check on him during the day by sending helpful messages such as "come home early." She also provides timekeeping services and weather advice, turns off the lights when her master leaves the house, adjusts the home's heating and cooling, and remembers their anniversary. Azuma is an ideal smart wife or girlfriend, doting on her man's needs. She is also useful and efficient, helping Japanese men keep their schedules on track. But if she does too good a job, the singles population of Japan may not need to look for a human companion, potentially exacerbating the falling birth rates in the country. On this point, the Japanese government has bigger plans for smart wives, as do other nations like China. Professor of Anthropology Jennifer Robertson suggests that there is a push to position social and care robots like Pepper as an opportunity to redirect Japanese women's time back to the task of having children, by freeing up the time that they're spent on caring responsibilities. Smart wives are thus entangled in social and political agendas about the role of women, wives, and heteronormative relationships in contemporary societies that we explore throughout this book. Sex robots and virtual pornography take these ideas in other tantalizing and potentially troublesome directions. US company Real Dolls Harmony Sexbot has 18 customizable feminized personality traits, including jealous, shy, moody, thrilled, and insecure. 42 different nipple options and different voice selections, including what they call a saucy Scottish accent. And she remembers her user's favourite food, like any smart wife should. But her true stroke of genius is this: Harmony's removable and self-lubricating vagina is dishwasher safe. She is smart, with controllable parts and efficient cleaning, and wifely, devoted to her man's intimate needs. She is a woman with all the sexy bits, without all the mess or fuss. Harmony is customizable, yet uniform, deeply feminine, but with masculine efficiency, and there to be enjoyed, consumed, and penetrated. To be clear, this isn't creepy because we're talking about a robot. We're not here to vilify anyone's kinks, but rather because it embodies a pornographic idea of female sexiness that, in some cases, celebrates non-consensual sex. And this gets to the heart of the strange paradox that characterizes the smart wife. She is simultaneously a dutiful feminine wife and sexual muse, while adeptly solving household problems with technological tools. She is docile and efficient, compliant and in control, seductive yet shrewd, intimate yet distant. She is ready to be played, ready to serve, and able to optimize her domain.
Thank you, Jenny. Now I have a very serious question for you. Did you ever imagine that you'd be writing about self-lubricating and dishwasher-safe vaginas?
Never in my wildest dreams. And I think it kind of, where it all went to, like when we were first talking about writing the book, just realizing the expansive domain of the smart wife and where these technologies, where the interoperability of these technologies was, the directions it was going in, and finding ourselves in novel research territory that we had not been in before. So finding ourselves researching about sex robots, finding out, like having to ask Google or our most fantastic research assistant, Paula, whether or not sex robot clitorises are in fact operative, or whether they're just ornamental, and then having to ponder questions like, what is the plural of clitorises? Clitorises or clitorides, whatever you prefer. So no,
Is that the answer?
Yes. That is the informed answer. I think we went with clitorises in the book.
Yes, such technical details that we never
Yeah.
imagined ourselves to be
Yeah.
looking. But I mean,
But
seriously, the connections between sex robots and their wifely roles was what was so striking with me in the book. You know, it was, we
yeah,
often think about them as very connected to the porn industry and just
yeah,
being kind of these objects there to be kind of consumed, as you sort of said. But when we delved into it, the ambitions of some of these companies to actually have them as companions and
yeah.
have them as sort of not just performing sex, but remembering favorite meals and, you know, helping with the housework and all these other kind of traditional wifely roles. This combination of functionality was really fascinating.
And like even like the whole, one of the companies has the tagline of being like the ideal girlfriend with less nagging. This idea that they can actually replace a human to human relationship and provide all of that the intimate care, not just the physical.
That's right. Yeah. And so we discovered, didn't we, that there was more in common with sex robots and digital voice assistants that might first meet the eye,
Yes, yes,
indeed, between all of the smart wife devices that we explore in the book.
yes. Hence Harmony gets her own chapter.
She does have her own chapter. Okay, so I have one more question for you, and I'm hoping that we also have some questions coming in the chat as well. So please add them there. We'd love to hear from you and to have you join us in this conversation as well. So Jenny, tell us, what is the problem with the smart wife and why do we want to change her?
Well, we wrote a whole book on what the problem with the smart wife is and why we want to change her. But I think, like, for me, one of the key kind of impetuses to start this project is the problem being that these technologies are already in development and they're already very well, they're contained, but also the way in which they're being considered and designed and implemented in the home is very narrow. And we see the expansion of the market being at a point where if we don't interject now, then potentially we miss that opportunity to change the direction of what the smart wife is and what she will be able to do in the home and for whom she will be able to do those things in the home.
Absolutely.
I think that was my primary reason.
Yeah, I agree. So we've sort of we don't have, we can keep asking each other questions, but that was the ones that we had prepared. So we would really love to hear your questions, but I will ask you one more while we're waiting to see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask us, Jenny. And I guess it's similar to what you asked me before about the reboot. And, you know, we have a whole chapter devoted to what we call our Smart Wife Manifesto or our Smart Wife Reboot, with 9 different proposals of how we can turn it around. So I think that's something that is quite unique about our book, that it, you know, doesn't just critique this wide domain. It also really tries to provide some inspiration and practical suggestions for how we move forward with this whole area. So you asked me what my favorite proposal was. What's yours?
I really like the idea, we call it queering the smart wife. And in that sense of opening up what is considered to be feminine and femininity and making it far more diverse. So we're not arguing that these kinds of devices shouldn't be feminine or feminized. We're just saying that they just have this very narrow idea at the moment of what that can be, and we want that range to be wider. And also the whole queering the smart wife as well is about rethinking who she is there for, because, you know, we know it's a very male dominated industry, but that doesn't mean that the customer base is male or male dominated, or even that it needs to be binary dominated. So I want to see more of that.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. Stacey, I think we have some questions coming in now. Did you want to facilitate this part of the discussion?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Molly would like to know, what was the process of writing the book together like, and how did that differ from other writing you've done?
Oh, fun. Not to say that the rest of the writing wasn't fun, but this was a whole process of writing in that we dedicated a lot of co-located time to it. So I would go and stay at Yolande's lovely home for writing retreats, many enjoyable writing retreats. And Paula Akari, our research assistant, would come and stay too, and she would bring her dog Dara. And so there was just the whole process of coming together to share the ideas, the intense writing, but also the intense friendship as well during that time of having a shared goal. Dara reminding us to get up from our desks regularly to go for walks on the beach, and then getting to relax of an evening and watch one of the many sci-fi programs or films that we see the Smart Wife inspiration coming from, getting to watch one of those after a shared dinner with a glass of wine and constantly just being sparked by other ideas that then we would have to fold into the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was part research of sci-fi, part writing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think for me too, I mean, this is the first book that both Jenny and I have written for a wider audience than just academics. Mm-hmm. So our other books are written for academic audiences. And even though you'd think that might be simpler because the language is less technical and less theoretical and, you know, quite simplified, writing in an engaging format and getting out of that academic style of writing was really, really tricky, and actually ended up taking a lot longer than had we just written the book for academics. And also getting the balance right, because we are still academics. And so, you know, making sure that there is still rigor to our writing and that our writing still is based on peer-reviewed literature and on other scholars' work, and acknowledging those scholars' work, but also not kind of laboring over all of that like we might do in academic writing, because as we anticipate, the general reader isn't going to necessarily want to hear all about the history of a particular idea or, you know, the 10 other books that some professor in this area has written, even though they are amazing. So it was about kind of trying to strike that balance, and that was very difficult to please our academic peers and also a general audience. I don't know how we did with that yet, time will tell, but that was something we thought about very, very deeply.
Yeah.
Okay. Natalie would like to know, were there surprising or interesting case studies of how people or groups or families engaged with smart wives in unexpected, critical, productive ways?
Well, that's an interesting, I mean, we have a number of different household stories that we weave into the book from research that we've done with people who live in smart homes or use smart home technologies. And look, yes, there are lots of different unexpected ways that people engage with them and are critical with them and certainly are productive with them. One of the things that, I mean, an example that I can give there is we start a chapter called Boys and Their Toys with a really lovely excerpt from a household who talk about how they pull pranks on each other, or actually the man in the home who's more in charge of the smart home technology, which is a fairly typical story. He sort of plays around with the devices and turns the lights on and off remotely, and, you know, basically does gags with them, with these technologies, and how that's kind of very, very funny and a little bit annoying, but mostly funny. But we use that to kind of start to think about what it means when one person in the home, in this case mostly men, have a sort of responsible for bringing the technology into the home, for managing it, for setting it up, and then also ultimately for running it. And that kind of goes into some of the problems that chapter goes into some of the problems that can arise from that, in terms of these devices now being used in domestic abuse situations and also in security kind of and privacy issues. So I'm not sure if that completely answers the question, but it's I guess it's kind of one of the ways in which these things that you wouldn't expect people to use these devices for can also lead to other unforeseen effects. Do you have any other examples, Jenny, that jumps your
Yeah,
mind?
I think like thinking about productive ways, and it came out in the field work that you had done, Yolande, and it's coming out as well in field work that I'm in the middle of right now, is that the ways in which technologies can be used to help particular groups. Like I know there was a person in the field work who had mobility issues, and so the use of smart, like a smart door lock and a smart doorbell, meant that it gave that person, and a very similar situation in my current field work, that it gives people a sense of control over their home. And I think a lot of these technologies are often considered in terms of providing security, like keeping people out of the home, but also thinking about how it allows people to feel like they get a sense of, rather than have to provide someone with a key to be able to like come in and care for them so that they can just show up and surprise them, if you like, they actually get that sense of autonomy and dignity of letting someone into the home when they are ready to receive them into the home. So that was for me was a very productive way of these technologies being used.
I just want to add one other thing there. I mean, one of the things with our book that I think is worth making clear is that we're certainly not saying that these devices can't be and aren't useful. And in fact, you know, Jenny in particular is an avid user now of Google Home. I'm a reluctant user of Alexa. And in our fieldwork, that's the other thing that was quite clear, that these devices provide many benefits to homes. And we also talk about the benefits that all the various other smart wives that we raise in the book, like social robots and, you know, even sex robots, all the various benefits that they can bring for different people. So we don't kind of question their usability exactly. There are instances where we do, and we kind of go, is this really a useful solution to something? But our critique is kind of a little bit higher up than that. And it's about the effects of the smart wife in society, the effects of having a feminized workforce to solve a whole bunch of feminized problems in many supposedly gender progressive nations. That's really kind of at the level where we're discussing some of these things and raising concerns and proposals.
Okay, Lise would like to know, is one of your suggestions that we stop calling the devices wives?
Good question. We don't actually. And I think it's because, well, mainly because the idea of a wife is so evocative of this idea of being a support, and, you know, taking direction from Annabelle Crabb's work and all the research that goes around in terms of how useful it is to have a wife. It provides benefit, like financial, emotional, physical benefits that are entrenched in our society, and our problem is that there's a particular demographic that get kind of shunted into the position of being wives and not of having a wife. And what we want to illustrate is the benefits of having a wife, and sort of taking away the idea of the wife takes away the kind of all the arguments for why it would be useful to have one.
And look, obviously we made quite a deliberate decision to call a bunch of technology smart wives, and that's a provocative decision. We recognise that, and we're sure some people might not like it, but it was an intervention in itself to kind of point out the unifying characteristics of so many of these devices. What we're concerned about is if we just kind of say, well, they're not wives, let's stop calling them wives, is that we go into this really difficult terrain that we see now with conversations around gender neutral devices, where we just say, oh, we'll fix the voice and there we go, problem solved. And that really then kind of, it almost stops the conversations that need to still be had around the gendered roles these devices are performing, the feminized personalities might have, or even the physical form of them. We talk about the curves and the cylinders and how those are kind of feminized as well in some of the robotic designs, and also just the AI designs that are coming out. So we stick with the term wife because we want to keep having this conversation. And I think, yeah, it does need to kind of be part of the mix until we sort of see some significant change, recognizing though that there are also some problems with that. And we do discuss those and raise those ourselves. You know, anthropomorphizing devices like we do, it's complicated. It doesn't, you know, suggesting that a sex robot is a woman when it's not, it raises a whole lot of other issues. And we talk about those extensively in the Harmony chapter, like, for example, can a sex robot consent, and does it really matter because it's not actually a person? It's an object. So these kinds of questions are, yeah, they're things that we also discuss in the book.
Yeah, and I just also want to add, like, we very much, we use the term wife as an intervention, as Yolande says, but that didn't mean that we weren't, we didn't consider how problematic and how problematic the term is, and how problematic the whole history of the role of the wife is. And we did originally have a chapter on the issue with the wife. But there's a point in the development of a book where not everything you want to cover gets to be included in the book. And I guess the whole troubling history of the wife was one of the things that has been set aside for the time being. And partly because it's also very well covered by other great scholars.
Molly would like to know if you can each say what you're working on next.
Sure.
Well, at the moment, I'm doing some really interesting research with a group of scholars and also an aged care provider on smart home technologies with older people in Australia. So that's been a really fascinating project. And I'm also, as Stacey mentioned during the intro, a lot of my research has actually been on and around energy consumption. And there is actually a chapter in the book that explores the sustainability impacts and effects of smart wives and takes an eco-feminist perspective as well, which goes much more back to my scholar roots, if you like. So I have another project at the moment called Digital Energy Futures, which is about how people are likely to live in the future with digital technologies and also with energy demand, to help forecast energy demand for the energy sector here in Australia. So quite a different topic, but funnily enough, energy was actually what got me into the energy was what got me into the gender space, because I was finding that a lot of people who are interested in smart grid, smart kind of energy technologies in the home are also more likely to be men. And so I have another piece of work where I characterize a group of people who are really interested in engaging with energy technologies, resource men, and we actually kind of pick up on that again in The Smart Wife. So yeah, that kind of work actually got me into this space, and it's still something that I'm continuing with as well in my other research.
And I am currently doing work, as Stacey mentioned in the introduction, on low-income households and digital inclusion. So looking at the way in which there's been a lot of initiatives and strategies addressing issues like having access to internet technologies or having skills to be able to engage and participate in a digital society, but my work is focusing on affordability barriers, especially in the way that they impact low-income families with children. So I'm currently doing field work. One is an intervention study looking at what happens when we remove affordability barriers, for how then households are able to engage, or like literally when households are not making decisions about internet access or or additional food, for example, how that changes the household dynamic and what that offers that family in the longer term. And that's been what I find really interesting in that work as well, is that it's challenging some of the assumptions about what we consider to be the technical landscape of low-income households. Because there's a lot of smart technology in those households. Smart TVs, for example, it's very difficult now to buy a dumb TV. So there are households perhaps with technologies that that maybe they're not using the full features of the devices, or they are, and then coming up against other issues, for example, like how the automatic settings on smart technologies will try and use maximum bandwidth available. And then what does that mean for households that are having to really monitor and check on their data usage and are running out regularly during the month and are having to choose how to spend their data, if you like, especially at the moment, having to accommodate homeschooling as well. So I'm now looking at smart technologies in, I guess, a population that isn't very well covered in the current research on smart homes. And also Yolande and I we'll have some opportunities, I think, to continue our work together. We're both investigators in a new research centre that is called, it's a Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision Making and Society. So there is a very strong emphasis there on smart technologies that we will get to be involved in.
That's great. I have a question, which is, and maybe you have some more time being locked down, what do you like to read when you're not reading for your work or your research?
Well, I've just been reading some of George Orwell's books with my partner, so 1984, which I'd never read before, which I actually feel like is some great oversight that I probably shouldn't reveal to anyone. But oh gosh, it was very strange reading 1984 in the middle of the pandemic, because there are just so many crazy parallels. And we also do mention Big Brother in the book as well, The Smart Wife, more in terms of popular culture reference. And also recently Animal Farm as well, which I didn't enjoy as much. 1984 was my favourite.
I've been really enjoying some like narrative nonfiction. I'm getting very invested in the idea of writing that's telling stories of people's lives. So my most recent one that I finished is The Trauma Cleaner. Just, yeah, exquisite. Absolutely loving that kind of the detail and the richness.
That's great, thank you. Does anybody else have questions? No? Okay, well, Yolande and Jenny, thank you so much for doing this with us, for being with us on your book birthday and celebrating with us. And we wish you lots of success with your book. And hopefully we'll get to meet you in person sometime. And to everybody who came out tonight and joined us, thank you so much. And we hope to see you at other events as well.
Thanks so much for having us, Stacey.
Thanks for having us, and thank you everyone for joining us as well. Lovely to have you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.